That is the sound of pure, unapologetic engineering overkill. There was a time before focus groups, before emissions targets ran the show, and way before accountants had the final say. In that era, one company decided to build the smoothest, most luxurious, most impossibly refined motorcycle engine on the planet. They weren't just trying to one-up the competition, they were trying to invent a whole new level of performance. A smoothness so deep, it was basically silent perfection. To pull it off, they created a six-cylinder masterpiece so complex, indulgent, and fantastically expensive to develop that it's the kind of thing that most manufacturers wouldn't dare to design and build, even today. This is the story of the Honda Gold Wing's Flat 6, a legend born not from racing, but from pure, unrestrained engineering ambition. It's a monument to a time when a company would move heaven and earth and spend a fortune doing it, just to answer one simple question: what makes the ultimate touring machine? But to really get this engineering marvel, you have to understand the world it was born into. This wasn't just about bolting on 2 more cylinders, it was about chasing a dream Honda had for over a decade. A king of kings, a motorcycle so far beyond everything else, it would completely redefine what a bike could be. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was an obsession brought to life. But before we go further, hit that like and subscribe button if you love the kind of engineering stories that shouldn't exist anymore. Because what Honda built here will never happen again. The story of the 6-cylinder Gold Wing starts not with its 1988 debut, but right after a revolution. In 1969, Honda blew the motorcycle world wide open with the CB750, the world's first superbike that made high performance accessible. But Soichiro Honda was never one to sit still. Having conquered performance, he looked to a new frontier, the American idea of grand touring. In the early 70s, the touring scene was owned by the rumbling V-twins of Harley-Davidson. Bikes like the Electra Glide were kings of the open road, big, comfy, and stitched into the fabric of long-distance riding culture. They had presence, and they had vibration. A lot of it. For Honda, a company built on precision and refinement, this was both a challenge and a massive opportunity. The goal was to build a flagship that could cross continents with a smoothness and reliability nobody had ever seen. Their first shot came in 1974 with the Gold Wing GL1500. It was a complete UFO. Instead of a V-twin, it rocked a 999cc liquid-cooled, horizontally opposed 4-cylinder engine. This boxer layout had 2 huge perks. First, liquid cooling kept temperature stable over long miles, a huge leap from the air-cooled engines of the day. Second, the boxer design gave it an incredibly low center of gravity, making a huge bike feel surprisingly easy to handle while offering a natural balance a V-twin couldn't touch. The GL1000 was a game changer, smooth, powerful, and reliable. But it was a naked bike. Honda built the ultimate touring engine, but forgot the touring amenities. Riders and aftermarket companies jumped in, bolting on fairings and luggage, proving Honda's concept was brilliant. Honda learned quickly. In 1980, they dropped the GL1100 Interstate, a turnkey tourer right from the factory with a fairing, panniers, and a top box. This was the moment the Gold Wing truly became the Gold Wing, and it was a massive success. The evolution continued with the GL1200 in 1984, bringing a bigger engine and more luxury. But by the mid-80s, the competition was waking up. Kawasaki had its Voyager, and Yamaha had the Venture Royale, a tech-heavy beast with a strong V4. The Gold Wing was still a benchmark, but it wasn't in a class of its own anymore. For all its luxury, the GL1200 was stretching the limits of its 4-cylinder engine. As the bike got heavier, the engine worked harder, and the effortless wave of power Honda was after felt strained. The engineers knew that to reclaim the King of Motorcycles title, they had to blow up the formula. They needed more power, more torque, and most of all, more smoothness. The answer wasn't in the Flat 4. The answer had been sitting in their R&D department for over a decade. Long before the GL1500 was a sketch, there was the M1, codenamed Project 371. The M1 was a top-secret prototype built in 1972. It was pure blue sky thinking, a challenge from Honda to find the absolute limits of a grand touring bike. The project was helmed by the legendary Soichiro Irimajiri, creator of some of Honda's wild Grand Prix race engines. He was told to build not what was practical, but what was possible. The result was a machine that looked like it was from the future. At its core was a longitudinally mounted, liquid-cooled, horizontally opposed six-cylinder engine displacing a staggering 1,470 cubic centimeters. This was at a time when the CB750 was the king. The M1 was immediately nicknamed the King of Kings. The M1's engine was a statement. Liquid-cooled and shaft-driven, it had features that were exotic then but would become Gold Wing trademarks. It wasn't built for screaming horsepower. It was designed for a massive, seamless wave of torque from idle to redline, producing a claimed 80 horsepower and capable of hitting 140 miles per hour. The goal was car-like refinement, a machine that whispered down the highway with the turbine-like smoothness only a six-cylinder could deliver. But the M1 was a dream, not a business plan. The sheer size, complexity, and cost of that flat six made it impractical for mass production. Plus, the engine and gearbox were so long that the riding position was cramped. It was a brilliant engine looking for a workable frame. So the M1 was shelved but never forgotten, becoming an internal legend. When designing the first Gold Wing, the GL1000, the team scaled back the dream, applying the M1's core ideas, boxer layout, liquid cooling, shaft drive, to a more producible flat four. The GL1000 was the practical version of the M1's radical vision. For over a decade, the M1 prototype sat in Honda's archives. But as the touring wars of the 80s heated up, Honda's engineers knew where to find their next move. To prove they were on the right path, they did something incredible. They took the original 1972 M1 six-cylinder engine and surgically implanted it into a modern GL1200 frame. This gave them a direct comparison: the proven flat 4 versus the legendary flat 6. The results must have been undeniable. The smoothness and torque from that old prototype engine sealed the deal. The future of the Gold Wing would have 6 cylinders. The project, kicking off in 1984, became the most complex and expensive model development in Honda's history. The goal was huge. The new bike had to be better in every single way: quieter, smoother, more powerful, and with better handling. This was a ground-up reinvention. Honda went through a mind-boggling 60 development stages and built 15 different prototypes. Thousands of hours were spent testing and perfecting every part. This was engineering by obsession. The result, shown at the 1987 Cologne Motorcycle Show, was the GL1500 Gold Wing. It didn't just raise the bar, it launched it into a different solar system, and at its heart was that magnificent 1,520 cubic centimeters horizontally opposed flat 6 engine. So why a flat 6? It all comes down to balance. Every engine has primary vibrations from pistons moving up and down, and secondary vibrations, a buzz at twice the engine speed. A V-twin has a classic shake. An inline 4 is smoother, but you still get a high-frequency buzz. A flat 6, however, is on another level. It's one of the few engine layouts in near-perfect primary and secondary balance. The 3 pistons on one side perfectly mirror the 3 on the other. Every force from one piston is almost instantly canceled out by an equal and opposite force from another. The result is an engine that is, by its very design, mathematically smooth. It doesn't need heavy counterbalancers to tame it. Smoothness is in its DNA. The 1520cc engine was a packaging masterpiece, only slightly wider than the old 4-cylinder. The single overhead cam heads were belt-driven, a quiet, reliable choice. Cleverly, instead of 6 carbs, the engineers used just 2 massive 36mm Keihin carbs, each feeding 3 cylinders. This simplified maintenance and guaranteed smooth fueling. The engine was tuned for monster low-end torque, cranking out 110 foot-pounds of torque at a lazy 4,000 RPM. Horsepower was a healthy 100, arriving by just 5,200 RPM, creating an engine that pulled hard from any speed in any gear without stress. Honda's obsession didn't stop there. To move a bike weighing well over 800 pounds, that's 372 kilograms, they added a genius solution: a reverse gear. It cleverly used the electric starter motor to inch the bike backward. A perfect example of solving a rider's pain point with brilliant engineering. The entire bike was built to insulate the rider. The bodywork was a seamless cocoon with no visible screws. The seat was a sofa. A single key operated the ignition and all integrated luggage. It had an onboard air compressor for the rear suspension and an integrated stereo. Of course, traditionalists complained it was too smooth, that it felt like a two-wheeled car. But for anyone who spent time on one, those complaints melted away. Riding the GL1500 was like nothing else. The engine pulled from just above idle in one long, unbroken surge. On the highway, it hummed along, the tachometer barely moving. This feeling of effortless, endless momentum was addictive. Honda hadn't just built an engine, they'd built a new feeling of travel. This level of detail, this obsession with perfection, is what separates a good machine from a legendary one. So if you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference and allows me to keep digging into stories like this one. Now back to the king. When the GL1500 arrived in 1988, it completely reshaped the luxury touring market. While competitors like the Yamaha Venture Royale and Kawasaki Voyager were refining old ideas, the GL1500 was a revolution. It instantly set a new standard. The phrase two-wheeled Cadillac was thrown around for good reason. The ride was impossibly plush, wind protection was amazing, and the engine's silence was uncanny. For the first time, you could ride 500 miles and feel relaxed, not beaten up. A rider and passenger could have a normal conversation or listen to music in a vibration-free bubble. This changed the market, especially in the US, the Gold Wing's spiritual home. Honda's plant in Marysville, Ohio, was cranking them out. It became the status symbol for the serious touring rider. In 1996, the 1 millionth Honda motorcycle made in America rolled off the Marysville line. Fittingly, it was a Gold Wing. But the Gold Wing's greatest legacy is its reputation for being supernaturally reliable. Because the Flat 6 was so over-engineered, it was barely breaking a sweat. Stories flew around of bikes hitting 100,000, then 150,000 miles without major engine work. Today, it's not unusual to find GL1500s with over 200,000 or even 300,000 miles on the original engine still running smooth. They became known as forever bikes, machines that could outlast their owners. This durability is a direct result of that obsessive engineering. By building an engine far more capable than it needed to be, Honda accidentally created one of the most reliable vehicles ever made. The GL1500 platform was so far ahead of its time that it stayed in production for 13 years, until the 2000 model year, with only minor tweaks. For a single model to last that long shows how right Honda got it from day one. For over a decade, it had no real competition. The GL1500 was king. But by the late 90s, technology had moved on. Honda started working on the next chapter. Redesigning the legend fell to Masanori Aoki, a project leader with a sport bike resume, having led development of bikes like the CBR 600 F3. His mission was shocking. "We set out to keep 80% of the Gold Wing's touring capability," he said. "My job is to add more fun factor, to build a Gold Wing with the kind of acceleration and handling people normally associate with sporting machines." The result, which debuted in 2001, was the GL1800, a quantum leap. At its core, the Flat 6 was still there, but bigger and better. It was bored out to a massive 1,832 cubic centimeters. More importantly, the two big carbs were replaced with a modern fuel injection system. This not only improved fuel economy, but gave the bike a crisp, instant throttle response the old 1500 could only dream of. But the real story was the chassis. The heavy steel frame was gone, replaced by a massive, rigid, and surprisingly light aluminum twin-spar frame, tech normally found on high-performance sport bikes. The effect on handling was night and day. The GL1500 was stable, but could feel like a barge. The GL1800, despite its size, felt shockingly nimble. Its lower center of gravity and stiff frame made it eager to turn, with agility unheard of for a full-dress tourer. The two-wheeled Cadillac now had the soul of a sport tourer. It could eat up highways in total comfort and also dance through twisties with a confidence that would embarrass smaller bikes. The over-engineered spirit was alive and well. The new engine was more powerful, the frame was a work of art, and it was packed with updated tech, including optional ABS and even a motorcycle airbag, a world first. Some purists, however, felt a bit of the 1500 soul was lost. The GL1500 was sportier, but some found its ride firmer and less plush. Luggage capacity was even slightly reduced for sleeker styling. The 1500 was the ultimate pure tourer, singularly focused on comfort. The 1800 was a more well-rounded machine, a brilliant mix of luxury and performance. It was a smart evolution, adapting the Gold Wing for a new generation that wanted comfort and a dynamic, fun ride. The king had learned how to dance. The Honda. Gold Wing, in both its 1500 and 1800 forms, represents the peak of a certain kind of engineering, driven by what if instead of what for. It came from a time of ambition, when a company like Honda could decide to build the best motorcycle engine in the world, just because they could. Today, a project like the original GL1500 seems like pure fantasy. The forces shaping the industry have completely changed. First, emission standards like Euro 5 are incredibly tough. Getting a massive 1,800 cubic centimeter six-cylinder engine to comply is a monumental and expensive task. Second is the insane cost of development. The GL1500 project was famously expensive in the 80s. Today, with computer modeling and complex electronics, the cost to develop a totally new six-cylinder engine and frame would be astronomical. In a market focused on platform sharing, a unique engine this complex is a luxury almost no one can afford. Third, the market itself has changed. The full-dress tourer is no longer the undisputed king. Adventure bikes have stolen a huge piece of the touring pie, offering a different kind of freedom. The new engineering battleground is electronics. Fancy suspension and rider aids are the new ways to flex. And finally, the era of the maverick engineer, the visionary like Soichiro Honda who could push a passion project through, has mostly been replaced by risk-averse, market-driven decisions. The question is no longer, what's the most incredible thing we can build? But what does the data say will sell with the best profit margin? A massive, heavy, six-cylinder bike is a tough sell in that meeting. The Gold Wing's Flat 6 is a relic from a golden age, a monument to when engineering ambition was the main goal. It's a masterpiece we can admire, but one we'll probably never see other manufacturers try to replicate. So what's the legacy of the Gold Wing's Flat 6? It's not just an engine, it's a statement. It's proof that sometimes the most irrational engineering ideas lead to the most enduring legends. It's the confidence of knowing your machine is barely breaking a sweat at 80 miles an hour. It's the smoothness that rewrites what you think a motorcycle should feel like. And it's the satisfaction of owning something built with so much integrity that it's often the last motorcycle a rider ever needs to buy. In a world of loud and compromised machines, the Gold Wing six-cylinder engine is a bastion of serene, unapologetic competence. It never shouts for attention. It doesn't have to. Its brilliance is in its silence. Its strength is in its smoothness, and its legacy is written in the millions of miles it has traveled, quietly and reliably, across every road on the map. It was, and still is, Honda's opus in metal. A masterpiece of over-engineering from a time when building the ultimate motorcycle was all that mattered. So, what do you think? Was this the peak of Honda's engineering, or just the beginning? Drop your take in the comments, hit subscribe, and join the community that keeps these legends alive. We've got more deep dives coming on the machines that defined entire eras. Ride safe, ride hard, and I'll see you in the next one.